Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by Jash Mehta of Pop and Bottle. Jash, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Cameron. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so I'd like to start out with your upbringing. Where did you grow up, and what would you say your childhood was like?
So I grew up in Surrey, just a small town in Surrey, which is about 45 minutes southwest of London. So I grew up in the UK. Um, I grew up in kind of a small-ish town, suburban town. Still visit there all the time and loved growing up there. I had a really simple childhood. My parents worked a ton. They were entrepreneurs. My parents worked together actually. They had a business together. They still did until a couple of years ago. They retired. And yeah, I spent a lot of my childhood either at school, as children do, and or kind of watching them after school build their business.
Mhm.
So got learn a lot through being kind of in that world, just overhearing conversations, seeing them
Yep.
work really hard, um, seeing them kind of problem solve all the time, and um, that all the challenges that businesses, especially small businesses, have. Kind of I saw firsthand. Yeah, those were kind of the two worlds that I lived in as a child,
Yeah.
and definitely are the two kind of worlds that shaped what I decided to do as an adult.
Yeah, being around that growing up, did you have any interest kind of like around entrepreneurship at that time, or what were some of your interests growing up at that time?
Yeah, I feel like I had two phases of childhood. The first phase was that I wasn't interested at all, and having to kind of spend a bunch of time tagging along to kind of my parents' business stuff was, as like a 8-year old and 9-year old, that was just not fun. I wanted to be with my friends and not do any of that. So the first phase, I kind of was quite against it. I thought about making choices in life that didn't need me to work so hard and didn't need me to do all of those things. And then the second phase of childhood, like as I became a teenager um, and kind of, I definitely when I was in college in my early 20s, I really changed my view. I actually thought that like clearly it had been shaping me in that time, but I just didn't know it.
Mm.
And yeah, in that stage of life, I thought it was amazing to be able to create something, to be able to build a team, and to kind of have control of your own, your own business and your own destiny in that way. Was
Yeah.
really attractive to me, and all the things that seemed like the negatives, like working, having to work so hard and having to having work creep into your personal life all the time and having to take risks. All those negatives actually at the right phase of life were real positives to me.
Mm.
So yeah, I would say definitely two camps. Like the earlier camp wasn't interested at all, and then the
Yeah.
latter camp was like super interested.
Yeah, so I saw you eventually went on to study at the London School of Economics.
Mhm.
What led you to go there, and what was that experience like overall for you?
Yeah, I started to really like kind of economics, business, finance. In at kind of the later years of school, so around like age 16, 17, 18. Those were kind of the areas, those were kind of the subjects that I started to become really interested in. And in the UK, the college system is slightly different, where you actually you choose your major before you even get to college. So you're applying for a very specific major, and you kind of almost have to have a view on what you want to do, quite early on.
Yeah.
And so it was clear to me that that was the path I wanted to follow. And the London School of Economics was, one of the better universities in the UK if you're interested in those areas. So yeah, I loved the idea of being in London. I think one of the cool things about learning finance and learning economics in London is it's very connected to the markets and the world of business. Being kind of the central hub of the UK. So
Yeah.
for all of those reasons, it felt like a good fit for me.
Hmm. Yeah, and post graduation, before we get into Pop and Bottle, I saw some of your resume. You stayed in the London area. You went on to EY and another venture as well. What did post graduation look like for you, and kind of what route, what were you projecting yourself before getting into entrepreneurship yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question. One thing I realized at the LSE is I didn't want to do banking and finance, ironically, based on what I just said. I
Yeah.
really loved learning everything that I learned, and I really liked, I learned kind of the theoretical world of finance and economics and business, but I didn't I actually wanted to do something much more closer to running a business or being in an operational business versus working in finance. And at the time, there were kind of two streams that everyone post graduation were going into. Either they were going into corporate finance, or they were going into consulting. Those kind of seemed like the two if you wanted to work in a bigger company. So I followed the latter path and I joined Ernst& Young in their business consulting group.
Mm,
And that was really interesting to me, and I learned a lot, and it was a great introduction to the world of business and work. I spent, anywhere from 3 to 9 months
mm,
at either a business or at a government institution, but in a consultant role. And the projects were, looking at strategic projects, looking at operational projects. It just gave me a little bit of a window into the world of some of the problems that either businesses or government institutions were dealing with.
yeah.
And it was just a great place to land in terms of learning basic executive functioning, working in teams, all of that good stuff. So
Mm,
I thought it was a great place to start my career. After a few years of doing it, I knew that I wanted to be on the inside. I didn't, we had this fortunate position as a consultant of jumping into these problems, but at the end of the day, we would leave and we wouldn't be owning the problems. We wouldn't be executing the solutions. We would just be making
yeah.
recommendations. And at some point, it was very obvious that that was fantastic and it was great for the experience. But I really wanted to be on the inside in industry, actually working in teams to, whether it's grow or fix issues or whatever area of the business it was. I really wanted to kind of be on the ground and in the weeds.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was a great zoomed out experience of what that world was like, but I really wanted to zoom in. Yeah, I worked at a startup after that in kind of various operational roles. And then a life change brought me to San Francisco, which is where I live today.
Mm.
And that life change is really what was the kind of natural career break in my life,
Wow.
where it made sense to pivot and start a business.
Well, yeah, if you can get into that, what kind of was the result of coming to the United States after all these years in London, growing up in that area as well, but coming to the United States to live, grow your own startup? What was the result?
Yeah. So I moved to San Francisco, left my old career behind, and it was just it was a natural kind of closing of one chapter of life. And before I jumped into anything in San Francisco, I really wanted to take a bit of time, enjoy, the new culture and the new world that I was living in, and also really take a beat and figure out if it was the right time to start something of my own or whether I wanted to jump into a company out here. And there were kind of two worlds that were really interesting moving to San Francisco at that time. One, of course, was the world of tech.
Yeah.
And the other one for me, kind of now living in California, having lived in the UK, there was a sharp contrast in the world of food. Just being in California, close to the farms, part of this kind of the early part of the farm to table movement, also kind of early in the plant based movement. There's just a lot
Mm.
happening in food and wellness
Yeah.
that was really, really interesting. And that was really different to how I grew up experiencing food in the UK. And, that was the world that actually really captured me when I moved to California. And I'd always had an interest in food and an interest in wellness, but it was definitely accelerated when I moved out here.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I decided that I was young, late 20s, had an appetite for risk, was in an exciting new place where also entrepreneurship was very much in the water, and
Yeah.
it felt like a really good time to take a risk. I also kind of coincidentally around the time that I moved to San Francisco, a very good friend of mine moved within the same year as me, and
Mm,
um, having a potential partner to start a business with that had very similar interests, that also was kind of part of the timing that made sense. And so, yeah, it was kind of those life circumstances that led us to starting the business. And
yeah,
yeah, and that's yeah, kind of the
incredible.
early story.
Incredible. So, yeah, so you guys, you had this venture idea, you wanted to start a business, but what was the reasoning behind kind of getting into CPG, but also like beverages alone? Was there a problem you were trying to solve in the market?
Yeah, we were definitely very naive,
Yeah.
and I'm very honest about that. We part of the part of the reason we were willing to just dive in was we actually were not from the industry,
Mm,
and I think that of course having experience in any industry you're going into is very very helpful. But there is some blessing to actually being kind of fresh because you're willing to one look at things in ways that others might not because you haven't actually been in the weeds, but two, also take risk because you actually don't know how difficult things are.
yeah.
So that helped us. But the problem that we were trying to solve is this: we were great friends. We loved our daily coffee and tea. We'd meet every day over our latte, talking about ideas um, and we definitely knew that we wanted to do something in the intersection of food, beverage, wellness, and supporting the plant based movement. That was kind of what we were living and breathing.
Hmm.
And we would meet and have our latte every day. And the irony of that was there was tons of sugar in it. It was hard to find good dairy free options that didn't have loads of additives.
Mm,
Um, there was very few organic options, and also when we looked at the grocery store shelf, which is where we were shopping every day as we kind of devoured all of the wellness trends, there was very little on the grocery store shelf when it came to convenience in this form factor. And so that's really the area that we became super interested in is how can we bring wellness to the coffee movement.
yeah.
And at the time, third wave coffee was really expanding. There were some cool brands being created in the space that were really elevating the quality of coffee. But there
Yep.
was very little happening when it came to kind of wellness and the experience of coffee and tea. And that's what we were breathing, and that's what we were really excited and motivated to work on. And so we started developing recipes in my apartment at the time with our Vitamix blender and our cold brew machine, and just started kind of testing how to create the best versions of the cleanest version of a latte with the purest ingredients, with really this, but that didn't sacrifice on taste. That still
Yeah.
had the indulgent nature of what we wanted from our daily ritual, but in a format that kind of supported our overall wellness goals. Um, and it started very much as a experiment. We had no idea if it had legs. Like I said, we were new to the industry, so
Yeah.
we just felt like we were willing to try and try something different. And and at the time, didn't have ambitions beyond just getting to the next step.
Yeah.
Maybe at the time we weren't sure, is this going to just be a small cool San Francisco brand that we're developing, or will it be a California thing, or does it have legs beyond that? We really didn't know.
Yeah.
The motivation really was just to create a great product.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, that was really the problem we're solving. And then it's kind of taken on a life of its own since then.
Yeah. So at this point, kind of being an experiment, not really having industry insight either, where did you go then? Once you guys have like this flavor, this formulation that you kind of are interested in, did you go to a co-manufacturer, some external advice? What was that next step?
Yeah, great question. Again, there are things in hindsight that there are stages of the business that we, in hindsight, would not have, we could have leapfrogged over if we knew better, but we didn't. And so we did things very small and very grassroots. So in hindsight, we definitely could have skipped over those. However, doing those taught us a lot as well. So like we have no regrets, but But no, we didn't go to cone manufacture. I think that would have certainly been a very viable path.
Yeah.
We really took a hard path, but a valuable one, which is that we started a small commercial kitchen ourselves, and so that required getting food service licensed, finding a licensed facility where we could operate,
Mm.
and basically getting licensed so we can make the product ourselves with a very small team.
Wow.
So we were essentially operating a tiny co-manufacturer ourselves. We'd produce the weekends, um, and yeah, we were really wearing all the hats. We would do production at the weekends. We would sell and market during the week. We would even deliver product ourselves.
Wow.
And that's what we did when we had 20, 30, 40 accounts.
Wow.
And then, of course, starting to look ahead, realized that that was not sustainable forever. And we hired a production manager who came from another beverage company and upgraded to a larger facility, still self-run. It was pop and bottle operated,
Mhm.
but it got us out the kitchen and it allowed us to scale a little bit. And that's kind of how we operated for a while. And then the next step function up is when we moved to a co-manufacturer.
Yeah. Wow. So, what did the supply chain look like at this stage when you guys would produce? Would you kind of produce to order, kind of demand by week, or would you hold inventory? What would that management look like?
Yeah, we would pretty much produce to order. At the time, we had a very short shelf life,
Hmm.
we didn't have any ability to hold weeks of stock.
Yeah.
And since then, that's evolved as kind of our processes have evolved. But yes, it was very much we took orders for the week from our key grocery stores and produced that weekend per those orders. With maybe a little bit of buffer and then sold kind of basically the entirety of that inventory the week after. So um, that's kind of what it looked like in those early days. It was all very specific based on the demand we had
Yeah.
until our shelf life changed, and then that's when we were able to kind of adjust that a little bit.
For sure. So, what did the go to market look like for you guys? I know you kind of launched in markets early on. Did you launch in kind of the West Coast retail outlets, or what did that look D2C, or how did that play at start?
Yeah, we actually did no DTC at this stage of our business, and we didn't for many years.
Yeah.
We really focused on grocery distribution,
Hmm.
primarily because we had a very short shelf life product, and it also required refrigeration. So direct to consumer was just never a viable channel for us for all of those reasons.
Yeah.
And But grocery very much was. And in San Francisco and in the Bay Area where we were producing and living, there were really fantastic, still are really fantastic health-led stores that super interested in innovation, super interested in wellness, and were open to trying local brands and supporting local businesses.
Hmm.
And they also had a great audience of the type of customer that we were
Yeah.
looking to attract for our product. So and we really focus on grocery distribution and set ourselves up in terms of product market fit to service the kind of the grocery customer in
Mhm.
terms of the size of product we designed and the look and feel and the pricing, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, I would love to hear kind of your feedback on the branding aspect of launching with Pop and Bottle. First of all, the name behind Pop and Bottle, and then kind of the branding point of view as a team. Kind of what led you to go with that glass bottle, that clean look to kind of demonstrate the product inside.
Hmm. Um, yes, I like I look now at our. It's really funny. We have kept so much of the. A lot of companies will go through rebrands. Some will even change names. When you're an emerging brand, you don't always get things right day one. And I'm not saying that we did, but it is funny and wonderful to me that so many of those decisions that we made back then, when it was the two of us just talking about ideas in my kitchen, have stayed. And the branding is very much one of those. Of course, it's had to grow up in the sense that some of the things that we were doing were not scalable or commercially viable. They were choices that we made that made sense when you're making a very handmade small batch product,
Yeah.
and you have to evolve that over time as you start to scale. But the look of what we designed back then is almost identical to what we have today,
Mhm.
and again, like I said at the top of this conversation, sometimes being brand new to an industry, you just you look at things in a different way. And we didn't have any of the CPG nuances of branding and packaging and the way things were done, and that's how they therefore should be done. We didn't kind of have any of those biases.
Yeah.
So when it came to the branding, we and my co-founder was from a fashion background, so she very much had that aesthetic when she looked at any product design. And we approached Pop and Bottle with this very minimalist, very well put together, very interesting color palette relative to kind of what was in the space.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what our gut instinct told us was right, and that's what we went for, and that's still very much the aesthetic that we have stuck with today, and that has served us well. And yes, to your point about kind of the simplicity of the design,
Yeah.
we knew that great packaging would be a differentiator for us, because CPG is a very competitive space where the customer, you have 5 seconds of their time to either get their interest or not. So we knew the packaging was
Yeah.
important, and having packaging that would stand out and that would be disruptive was key to our success being a bootstrapped brand.
Yeah.
But two, also we wanted it to signal the quality of the product, and everything that we were doing was about simplicity.
Mm.
We used no artificial anything when we produced Bob and Bottle, and a clean ingredient profile and a real ingredient profile was exactly the differentiator we were selling.
Mm.
And so to do that, to reflect that simplicity, we chose really simple packaging,
Yep.
and also have kind of stuck to that today. And then in terms of the name, again, we stuck to the name. We didn't change our minds, but it was something that we didn't hire a marketing agency to come up with.
Yeah.
It was something that the two of us decided back then, and have stuck to. And the idea behind it is that, or I guess the idea for us was that health should be celebratory and that wellness should not sacrifice taste or indulgence.
Yeah.
And so the idea of popping a bottle, of course, is to celebrate, and we wanted what we were producing to feel like an indulgence without sacrificing wellness or taste.
I love it. Yeah. So on the aspect of wellness, taste, functionality, clean ingredients, you guys do have amazing flavors. What kind of led you to go with the flavors that you have today? And at launch, what did the profiles look like flavor wise?
Um, we started with about 5 potential SKUs when we were conceptualizing,
Yeah.
and then narrowed into about 3 for launch. We knew that operationally it would be difficult to produce 5, with kind of the very small scale that we had, but also we knew that stores out the gate for a new brand we're not going to take 5 SKUs of ours. So um, we we started with 5 that we thought had legs, and then did kind of a very small friends and family tasting panel where we made a ton of these 5 different products, had everyone sample them. We created a little Google form where we asked everyone to complete it and give us feedback, rank the SKUs, and that was simple and a very affordable way to understand where we should start. And
Yeah.
so out of that process, we had 3 top SKUs that people loved the most, gave us the best feedback on. So we tabled the other 2 for future or to come back to, and we started with 3.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, we chose very popular but simple flavors, like a classic cold brew latte, a vanilla. Ultimately, the feedback from friends and family kind of informed us that that's where we should start. So we
Yeah.
weren't trying to, at the time especially, we weren't trying to reinvent the flavor wheel. We were just trying to really focus on making the best version of a cold brew latte or the best version of a vanilla latte.
Yeah.
And for it to feel familiar, that people would want to try it. And yeah, that's kind of how we started. And as those products did well, um, and as we kind of gained sales and kind of gained the trust of our customers, they were willing to give us a bit more shelf space, and we innovated more and added more SKUs.
Mm. So we touched on it earlier, kind of making to order and the shelf life of the product at start, and then
Mhm.
you talked about the evolution. But what does that shelf life look like now for retailers?
Yeah, it depends a little bit on the product. So we have 3 different product lines now. Some of them require refrigeration and they have a shorter shelf life, like our almond lattes. Um, some of them are shelf stable and have longer shelf life. So, um, depending on which part of the store we wanted to be in or what kind of store we've kind of adapted over time. But in the step function up was we went from a very short shelf life of about 3 weeks when we were producing in a very small way, in a very different kind of commercial kitchen style way, to about 12 weeks when produced in a
Okay.
larger facility with the right processes. So that was kind of the step function up change that we had.
Yeah. Looking at Pop and Bottle today and the different flavors, what would you say is the top seller overall, if you can depict that?
Yeah. Again, it depends a little bit on the product line, but generally, our vanilla, and this is not going to be a surprise because I think if you look at most coffee companies, this is one of the top sellers. But yeah, our for us and kind of our wellness but flavor led customer, the vanilla is the one that typically, when we do it in whichever product format, it sells the best.
Yeah. Looking at kind of your marketing today and the demographic overall, can you depict that demographic of shoppers?
Yeah. Um, I wish the one problem with selling to grocery stores is that we don't have this direct line with the customer, and so
Yeah.
while I cannot tell you with exact certainty, I don't have the data to, unlike if we were a direct to consumer business, but we still have a pretty good sense. We have a millennial, Gen Z, and kind of adjacent in terms of age demographic. That's typically our anchor customer, and then and again, this is not the only person who drinks pop and bottle, but typically we have a female leaning consumer.
Yeah.
And that really is kind of a product specific nuance because we make products that are more aligned with kind of how that demographic takes their coffee or tea.
hmm Amazing. Well, Josh, I like to conclude each episode with this. If you can share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, maybe something you've learned or regret along the way, what would you say that would be?
Oh, gosh. Um, choosing one is very difficult. But I would say one thing that is true to our story is that we were willing to not make assumptions because we've done things a certain way, and I've spoken about that a little bit in this session.
hmm
And I would say, yeah, I think that don't be afraid to do things a little differently. Don't be afraid to come at an industry with a kind of a different perspective. I think challenging some of those norms is how great businesses are built. And if we'd listened to everyone who told us we can't do it that way because it's not been done that way, or you won't be able to scale this because it can't be done that way, we wouldn't be at the stage we're in. So I think that healthy dose of skepticism applied to any industry has served us well.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. Well, Josh, thank you so much for taking the time. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out Pop and Bottle at popandbottle.com.